Soccer celebrations and hockey, Elliotte Friedman. Where does the sport come to?
What a week. That Carolina thing.
It's great. The Matthews Kane thing.
Matthews Kane, fantastic. Matthews in that red coat.
Yes, that thing's huge, by the way.
We're doing the outdoor. We're going to Winnipeg, right? So October 24th, the Wednesday night hockey game is Toronto at Winnipeg.
And you're going to wear the big red coat? Is that
well, I said I would, but I went on the website.
Yeah.
And it says, ask for price. And like,
hang on, Elliotte. When you have to ask what the price is, you can't afford it.
Well,
if you have to ask,
yes.
It's like Louis Armstrong once said about jazz. Hey, Louis, describe jazz. If you have to ask, you'll never know.
Exactly. And I wasn't asking because I thought I could afford it or not afford it. I was just curious to see what does something like that run. But also the name of the company that's making it, the designer that's making it, very, very high end. But I said to our MVP, Deb Berman, I would wear that on that broadcast.
Okay, Deb Berman
just to do it.
National style. And she handles all of us. So if you ever critique our clothes, you're critiquing Deb.
And someone suggested that I should get like a musket and a 17th century American Revolution hat and wear the whole thing.
Okay, you must have known something. You've been talking about the personality of Austin Matthews now for a while. Even at the end of last year's podcast, you were saying, you know what? Don't be surprised if we're talking personality first in the NHL. Don't be surprised if it's Austin Matthews leading the charge. What were you on to?
Well, I don't think I was really on to anything. It's just...
You just pulled that name out, though, and all of a sudden now we're seeing him magazine shoots.
I just think, Jeff, you've been around a long time. There's a lot of people who are going to listen to this podcast. You're in business. You're in life. If you pay attention, you always notice that if there's more to a person than you really think. Like, how many times anybody listening to this podcast, you get out of a meeting with someone or you meet someone somewhere and you say, there's a lot more depth to that person than they are showing us. And I always got that sense about Matthews. Mm-hmm. I always got that sense about him, that there's a lot more there.
Saw it on the ice last year, pointing to the goal, things like that. Like after events happen, the personality starts to come out. We saw that Sunday in Chicago. I was not expecting what we saw with the Carolina Hurricanes Sunday after the Rangers win.
Yep.
Not expecting what we saw. The same thing again Tuesday night as Carolina took care of the Vancouver Canucks. Andrei Svechnikov, by the way, game-winning goals in both of them.
Yeah.
The slow clap and then the soccer strut to the boards and then the smash in the glass. And moreover, and I can understand if that's led by a younger member of the team. It was his idea. This is Justin Williams. He's supposed to be an old school guy. You score a goal, you put your head down, you skate to the bench, son. That pleasantly surprised me that here's this, grizzled veteran from Cobourg, Ontario that says...
As Chris Johnston reminds us all the time.
I know, that's why I throw it in there. He's the guy that says, come on, boys, let's try something different.
I just think we're finally hitting the different era. Did you watch Anaheim Detroit on
I did.
Whatever night that was?
That was
Monday night, the 25th anniversary of the Ducks.
Yes.
So Brian Hayward.
Troy Terry with the shootout winner. Surprise.
Yes. And Brian Hayward was doing the intermission interview with the commissioner.
I know where you're going.
And he pulls out the kazoo or whatever, the duck horn. And
for the duck call they did with Eisner 25 years ago.
And I was like, there is no way he's going to do this.
Hang on. Hayward or Gary Bettman?
Hayward for sure. He's going to do it. He's a Ducks broadcaster.
Yeah.
And it was a good interview. And I said, there's no way, especially when then Bettman says, this is going to be a social media moment. He is going to do it.
Because I know I'm going to get roasted on Twitter for
this.
But
it was good.
I'll do it anyway.
But nobody roasted him. I think everybody kind of laughed. And, I just think the beginning of this year, look, we're talking about China and Europe. And I understand that people are bitching that they went to Europe and only played one regular season game.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of concern now that the commissioner wants to have regular season games in China that teams are really going to fight against going. And I had one owner say to me that one of the complaints that the teams had was you get into Shenzhen for a couple days and then you go to Beijing for a couple days. Are you really getting your big bang for your buck if you're moving out of a city after 2 days? Shouldn't you just stay or whatever? And I get all these debates. I think it's better to go than not go. But to me, the true thing to grow the game, if you really want to talk about growing the game, it's about the personalities. It has to be about the personalities first and foremost, and you can still be a quote-unquote personality and be a great teammate. We've beaten it into our head, Jeff, that these are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
They're not.
It's been an interesting couple of weeks in the NHL when you look at personality first and celebrating celebrations. All of this sort of under the umbrella of what we saw between Brad Marchand and Lars Eller.
Mm-hmm.
How does that... You see, you look at that situation and listen, Brad Marchand got blasted by a certain quarter and applauded by another quarter. And then I was on Twitter's ice surfing last night with Jason York. And Jason made the point.
By the way, I love the shirt that Stan was wearing, that Calgary Cowboys shirt.
That's right, man.
That thing was awesome.
Every week, Stan's going to put on another shirt.
I saw the
defunct team. Have you seen the ones?
I know I've totally interrupted Jeff. So we have a wardrobe room at our place. And I saw all these shirts there, all the old WHA shirts.
Wait till you see next week. It's not WHA, but it's beauty.
I got to tell you, I almost stole them. Like when I saw Stan wearing it on ice surfing on Tuesday night, I was like, because that was the first one I saw. I was like, I am taking that.
Yep.
Good thing I didn't.
There's a few things that I want to steal off the set. One of them is that Mike Palmateer, number 29 mask, which I'd love to steal.
The Ken Dryden one I saw too.
Dryden's out there as well. They've really put together a nice little set. And yeah, it's going to be really hard for me not to steal a few things. Stan's shirts, the Palmateer. By the way, Palmateer's the one guy that I've always wanted to interview that I know will never talk.
He has talked before, I think. Quiet?
I don't know. I don't know that he will ever do an interview. That's what I've been told, that he won't.
Well, let's get him in here.
I would love to do Palmateer.
Let's just go show up at his house. I think
why not? Show up with a couple of microphones. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, Brad Marchand and Lars Eller.
Yeah.
So Jason makes a point last night. He says, you know what? I have no problem what Lars Eller did. I'm like, wow, look at that, Jason. Really progressive. Good for you. That's fantastic. Except he shouldn't have done it by the Boston bench.
Well,
like, whoa. No. If you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. It's okay.
You know, here's the thing. Like, we had this debate because it happened last Wednesday. So we had the debate on our Scotiabank Wednesday Night Hockey show. Me, you, Doug, and Brian. And they both said the same thing. They said they have no problem with the celebrating, but they have a problem with it being in front of the Boston bench. And, you know,
I can see the Bruins players don't like it. It's uncomfortable, but...
You know, here's the thing, okay? So I look at it like this. As my point was, this is going to start happening more often. People are going to have to get used to it. But I do also recognize, Jeff, that if I do something that is perceived in the sport as taunting, I could get punched in the mouth. So I think you're always going to have 6 of one and a half dozen of the other. And because, you know, the one thing that was interesting to me is one of the players in the game told me that they were pretty sure that Marchand was cognizant of the time on the clock.
Because it was 6, not 5.
Right. If it's
5,
under 5 and he gets the instigator,
he's gone.
It's a big penalty. So they thought that was the most interesting thing, that Marchand undoubtedly looked up and said, if I'm going to do this.
So if it's 4:52, he's not doing it.
Probably not.
But
because they had a game the next night that there's
a 6 on there,
felt
so
important to win.
Fill your boots.
Yes. That was what one of the things that really stood out to me was.
Interesting points about personality as well. And, you know, the Gary Bettman situation was an interesting one. So I'm watching that piece, and him and Brian are doing a nice little intermission interview. And then I'm with you, and he pulls out the duck call. I'm like, is there any chance
like,
that the commissioners, just like once upon, I think Bettman's worn an NHL jersey only, I think, in '93. I don't think he's put one on since. Like, I don't know that we're getting there with the NHL commissioner to actually put on a jersey.
I understand that, though.
But no, I get that. Like,
Yeah,
I'm completely on board with that, and I understand it from everybody's point of view. But I just, you know, there's a you feel like social capital theory. Social capital theory is this idea that if you have a lot of different people in your environment, creative and progressive ideas move quicker.
I agree with that.
And encourage innovation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay? My concern is, not concern, but my only sort of reservation about, you know, the NHL growing and expanding and becoming more creative, it's still a lot of the same faces. Like, this is why, and I think rightfully so, people encourage more women in the game, more people from visible minorities in the game, because you get different ideas and you get different perspectives, and that is how everybody grows ideas, and they move that much faster.
I totally agree with that. And, you know, the one thing I really think has changed is definitely females and women, is that, you know, do you have any sisters, Jeff?
I do. I have a sister.
Okay, so how old are you?
49.
Okay, so I just turned 48. I can't believe you're older than me. Like, you look
Sorry.
young, and it's embarrassing.
Sorry,
anyway, but
Deal with the devil.
so I grew up. I have 4 sisters, 2 blood, 2 step.
Yeah.
And when we were younger, like, the girls were never encouraged to play sports. It was boys play sports, girls make doilies or stuff like that. Like, that's how it was back then.
For us, it was the guys played hockey and the girls figure skated.
Well, they didn't even do that. It was dance or arts or whatever. And now that has totally changed. And I do think that one of the things that sports has been slow to recognize, although I think some of them are starting to get better, is that women are as big sports fans as men now because they play it more. It's ingrained more from a young age. It's not discouraged like it used to be. And I do think in particular that is changing.
But even people that didn't play, like to have those voices involved, even if you didn't, play as a kid or picked up a stick a little bit later on in life, I still think there's I don't need to jump out in front of a subway to know that if I do, it's not going to tickle. Like, there's still some wisdom and value you can glean from someone who's not directly involved with your event or your enterprise.
Completely agree with that.
Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Ellen Etchingham used to write a blog called The Theory of Ice. And she started as someone who was just joining the game a little bit later on in her life, into her 20s, and just sort of, discovered hockey and found a love and a joy of it, having never played as a kid, never really gotten into it. And the blog still exists online. She doesn't write it anymore. She's since moved. Last time I spoke to her, she was in Asia, and she was playing hockey and following hockey there. Her and I became friends, like a brilliant, brilliant woman. And I learned more about hockey. And no, sorry, I shouldn't say that. I learned more about the assumptions that I have about hockey by reading her writing about hockey. I'm not going to do her justice if I try to describe exactly what her blog was about. But every single article that I read on A Theory of Ice, I learned something about the game, and I learned something about all the assumptions that I've made about it just by reading Ellen Etchingham. And here's someone who never played, was never really interested. All of a sudden, a light went off one day in her life, and she started to take it seriously and started to become interested. And these are all the questions and interests that she had around the game of hockey. That's why, if you haven't ever even played the game before, there's still a value in how you feel about it.
Absolutely. Always a value in ideas. Ideas are to be checked and either accepted or debunked.
And on that, let's get into the podcast. This is 31 Thoughts, brought to you by the all-new 2018 GMC Sierra Denali. Okay, here's the one piece in 31 Thoughts on Sportsnet.ca that really caught my eye and had me texting teams this morning as I read it. Thought 11. Here's one for you, an amateur scout said. Can you find the NHL team that had Petterson number 1 on its draft board? That, of course, the Vancouver Canucks' Elias Pettersson, who went 5th overall in 2017. Nico Hischier and Nolan Patrick went 1-2. So I texted some teams, and 2 came back to me. One said, we didn't have him number 1, but he was high. The other team said, we didn't have him quite at number 1, but he was number 1 amongst Europeans for us. Those are the only 2 teams that got back to me.
So, first of all, I figured I better put some Petterson content in the blog because everybody was going gaga over him. And it was funny. Like, guys were texting me back, oh, Hall of Fame? Like, you're putting him in the Hall of Fame already? I go, no, I need some content because this is clearly a big story in the country. And, the guy's a hell of a player.
Yeah.
I haven't asked them, but I would be curious to know if Nashville would be that team. They drafted his brother. And so they would certainly have some insight into him. Other than that, I'm not positive yet as to who that team is. But the one thing that really, what's interesting about it, Jeff, is that in Vancouver, they've already started using the Gretzky comparison a bit. Like, he's like Gretzky. And in the conversations I had with some teams about him, they almost wanted to say it, but they didn't want to say it. And the only reason they were bringing up Gretzky as a comparison is because he's not a overly powerful guy. He's wispy. He's slight.
Yep.
And if he's going to be successful, and he's a chance to be really successful, he's going to have to be that way, a dominant player, even though he's not physically built to be a dominant player. and that's the comparison that they were making. I was really curious about this. One guy said to me, if he does what Hischier does, comes to North America and plays a year, is he the number one overall pick?
Because, Nico Hischier came in and played with the Halifax Mooseheads
for a season.
For the one season.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting about Hischier, just as an aside, I talked to someone in the Halifax organization, and this was at the Quebec League Awards that I hosted with Louis Jean.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, where do you, because, Halifax has been the prospect factory, Nathan McKinnon, Jonathan Drouin, Timo Meier, Nick Ehlers, they've had some high-end NHL guys come out of Halifax. And I said, where would you put Nico Hischier? Skill set. And he said, honestly, I'd put him top. I said, over all those guys? He said, yep. And he said, here's why. McKinnon had Drouin to play with. Ehlers had Drouin. All these other players had other players to play with. Nico Hischier did all of that on the youngest team, not just in the Q, but the entire CHL. He did it as an import coming over, and everybody in the Q tested him. Slash, punch, trip, hack, all of it. And he kept getting better as the season wore on. He said, you talk to hockey guys around the team that have seen all the guys go through Halifax, and the honest ones will tell you, Hischier's probably the best.
Wow, that's
quite
the praise.
Huge praise for Nico. But I don't disagree. And not that you necessarily have to come over. Listen, Rasmus Dahlin didn't come over. He still went first overall to the Buffalo Sabres. But that was another curious line in 31 Thoughts this week. That, what happens if Petterson doesn't stay in Sweden, but rather chooses to play in the CHL?
This guy said he probably goes one.
I remember that draft so well. I remember the smile on everyone's face in Vancouver when they were going up on the stage.
Well, I watched the video last night as I was writing. The Canucks post their draft videos, and so it's clear that they're talking to Vegas, and obviously that draft goes Hischier 1, it goes Patrick 2, it goes Heiskanen 3, it goes Cale Makar 4.
Yep.
And so Vancouver, before the draft starts, they're pretty confident they're getting their guy, and they talk about flipping their pick with Vegas, where Vegas can go up to 5 and Vancouver goes to 6, and they still get their guy. And someone in Vegas told me that they knew what Vancouver was up to, that's what they were going to do, and they didn't want to give them an extra pick for it. Why bother? But the Canucks were worried about number 7, Rangers, who took Elias Pettersson, and they felt that if the Rangers got in front of them, they would have taken Petterson. So maybe the Rangers is the team. I'm not sure.
I wonder who Vegas would have been interested, because they ended up taking Cody Glass.
Maybe they take him anyway.
But if they knew that Vancouver was going to take Petterson,
well, that's why they rejected the deal. Right?
Oh, I see.
They said that's why they rejected the deal. Now, there is somebody who told me that there was a chance that someone almost snuck in there and got Petterson ahead of Vancouver. That there was almost, that somebody almost did it. And that...
Well, it's either going to be Colorado, Dallas, or Philadelphia. New Jersey was taking Hischier.
Now, I don't know the answer to this question yet. I'm looking into it to see if it was somebody there. But there is someone who said that there was almost a steal.
See, Dallas needed 2 things: defensemen and centers. Could it have been Dallas? They ended up taking Miro Heiskanen.
Well, the only thing
Heiskanen, as they're calling him now.
Yeah, the only thing I could possibly think of, and this just came to me right now, is that there was talk about Vancouver and Dallas swapping picks, right? I don't know how serious it was. There were rumors at the time about Tanev and things like that. I don't know how serious it was, but I am going to, it's something you kind of have to, I'm going to
No, this is good, because now
into.
I've got a million texts out about Petterson and going back to the 2017 draft, and all of a sudden now some interesting stuff will probably come back.
Yes, it always takes a year or two.
Now that we're far enough removed from that draft, it's like, here's where we would have gone.
So I'm going to find out about all this stuff, because they said that the Vancouver, there is a storyline there that says, like one guy says to me, whenever one of these guys comes on and goes boom, like Petterson has, there's so much revisionist history that comes out about who did what and who thought what.
It usually takes about a year after.
Yes.
I remember talking to someone in Boston. I said, if you guys didn't take Charlie McAvoy in that spot, what would you have done? He goes, Dante Fabro. Right away. We're taking Dante. It was between the two of them. So I think it'd be Charlie McAvoy or Dante Fabro in Boston.
I know Detroit the year they took Dylan Larkin, it was Dylan Larkin or David Pastrnak. And Pastrnak went, I think, 10 picks later. But he was the other guy if it wasn't Larkin. But anyway, there is some...
Just as an aside to I love these conversations, just have a million asides.
They're fantastic.
The thing about the Dylan Larkin pick that really burned me as someone that follows junior hockey and loves junior hockey and covers the CHL, I remember that draft. That was Philadelphia draft.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, okay, there's two teams I don't want Dylan Larkin to go to. One is Minnesota and one is Detroit. You know why?
Why?
Because those were
you hate them?
No, those were the two.
No, I'm going to spread that rumor that you hate them.
Okay, that's good. Those were the two teams that probably would have said, yeah, go to Michigan. Now, do you know who had Dylan Larkin's rights in the CHL?
I don't remember.
The Erie Otters.
Okay.
Think about Dylan Larkin
so he
playing
would have been
with
there
Connor
with
McDavid.
Right, okay.
And I asked McDavid about it. We were doing an event at the Rogers Center, and this is on tape somewhere. I said, have you ever talked to Larkin about it? He goes, oh, yeah, we've talked about it before. Like, come on, man, you got to come. Don't go to University of Michigan. Come to Erie. We'll destroy the OHL, set a ton of new records, and off we go to the Memorial Cup. He goes, yeah, we talked about it before. Just the idea of those two speedsters in the OHL together, Dylan Larkin and Connor McDavid. I love playing the
what if game?
Well, the what if game or the alternative hockey universe game. Right? What if, Joe Thornton ended up getting traded for Roberto Luongo, Boston, Florida deal before Florida's owner turned it down because he didn't want to absorb money, just how much the landscape changes. What were we talking about?
We were talking about Petterson, and did someone come up and try to steal them? There is... I was told that it almost didn't happen. I don't know how close it is. It's something we're going to have to both figure out, but it's an interesting story and worth looking into.
What are you most impressed by with Patterson? To me, the offense is the offense, but
the moves
and how defensively sound he is.
Well, he's smart, and
his back check is amazing.
He's smart. He plays hard, and the other thing too is he's breathed new life into Goldobin, right?
Yeah.
And that's a guy, if you're Vancouver and you're really searching for offensive players, you're kind of hoping that Goldobin could turn into one. And you could see this as an organization that really wasn't sure about him, didn't always like what they were seeing. And there's some chemistry there. He's breathed new life into his career. To me, the true measure of a great player is, do you make other people around you better?
For sure.
And he has done that with 77 there.
And once again, the Vancouver market has hope. Where last year it was Brock Besser, here we go, all-star game. Every couple of weeks there's a new headline with Brock Besser. It's Petterson now.
Maybe he'll be this year's MVP in San Jose.
We shall see. You're right about Sam Bennett as well with the Calgary Flames. I want to ask you about arena deal as well. Looks like they're sort of reaching out to re-engage between the city and the organization. But thoughts on Sam Bennett? See, the one knock that I'd always heard from people... Well, actually, one player from the organization told me this, that the knock on Sam Bennett was, and this might just be like, you got to get junior hockey out of your system, that he wants to treat every situation like a one-on-one battle.
Could be.
Right? And that was sort of one of the knocks. And eventually you get that out of your skin, you get that out of your body when you join the NHL and you learn to play the NHL game. Where are the Flames at with Sam Bennett?
Well, I think the only way that you can really tell something is by ice time and how they're used, right? And so in the first game he played 8:47, in the second game he played 7-something, and he's not taking faceoffs. He wasn't on the power play. He was basically a fourth line winger, and it's a team that's had a huge makeover. It's got a new coach. And even in the preseason, it was like that. I'll tell you this: I had one person really defend Bennett. They had a preseason game against San Jose where he challenged Evander Kane. He didn't back down. They were like, "Whoa!" I mean, that's pretty impressive. But I do think there have been several times over the years where Bennett's name has come up and Calgary's been asked about him. I've heard teams like Anaheim, Philadelphia, Montreal, Tampa. I think that was with Drouin. Yeah. We're all involved in that. And I think they're wary of trading, a 22-year-old guy. You just look up the road and they traded Taylor Hall and look what that's turned into. So I think there's a wariness about it. I don't think they're really interested in doing it. Mm-hmm. But, last night in Nashville, he played 13 minutes and he scored, but it got taken out by a quick whistle.
Yeah.
I think if he's...
That's too many men on the ice call.
Yes. Like if he's 13, 14, 15, 16 minutes, we're probably better. But if it's... Like last night, the guy who got down under 10 minutes was Frolik.
Yep.
So I just think that if he's not going to play, it's not going to be too long until this comes to a head.
Funny you mentioned Taylor Hall a second ago, because watching Sam Bennett play in Kingston when he played junior, and it's a nice problem to have if you're a head coach. He would go to the net as a centerman as hard as Taylor Hall would as a winger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember watching him in his draft year. That was, again, Philadelphia draft as well. And saying to myself, this guy goes to the net hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you look at it, and a cynical side of you says, oh, he's got to stop that, or injuries are going to become an issue for him in his career. You need to play a lot smarter. But there's a guy that goes for it every time he's on the ice. Whether he's, like, there's playing hard and there's playing smart.
Yeah.
And maybe Sam Bennett is guilty of just playing hard.
Mm-hmm.
I know it can be frustrating.
But I think he's not playing center now, Jeff.
No, I know.
And people are always looking for centers. Always looking for centers.
That's what he was growing up all the way.
Yep.
Anything about the Flames arena deal? I mean, the mayor sort of reaching out. This is not being done in an election year. This is not being done publicly. I guess the question I'm asking, Elliotte, is this going to be one of those situations where, boom, very quietly an arena deal is announced? Because the public posturing from both sides was doing nothing, was producing a stalemate. Is there going to become a time? I think we all know there's going to be a new arena eventually in Calgary.
Yes.
Is this just going to get done quietly?
Well, I think that's your hope. Like, I'm wondering, part of me is wondering are they announcing that they're going to be talking again because they have had the feelers, the backdoor feelers?
Mm-hmm.
If you were really making progress, why would you announce it to everyone? Why? And the answer I've learned is, in political circles, there's times you have to be public about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, like, one of the things guys told me about is it's always sensitive there because there's not a lot of trust between the Flames and Nenshi. Like, he doesn't really like them and they don't really like him. And so I think the big thing is going to be, are they going to be able to find a common ground on, like, if you read the comments from the city, it's like they have a plan here that's going to benefit everyone, they claim.
Mm-hmm.
And the Flames are going to be looking at it from, that's fine, but it's got to have a financial benefit to us too. And that's always been the problem. And I think if the people who didn't get along can find a way to get along, it'll get done. But there's going to be some big egos in that room.
We've already seen them publicly.
Yeah.
And that got nowhere.
And it's not one side. It's both sides.
It's both. Now, and one was in an election year too, and that turned into an election issue.
Yeah.
One thing you did mention as well, and I'm always fascinated by this as well, cap estimates.
Yeah.
81.4 to 85.4 if the escalator is used.
Fully used.
If I am the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm saying hallelujah. Give me more room.
Well, I think almost everybody would say that.
But that's the team that's facing the obvious crunch.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, like, I get the sense, Jeff, that Toronto's looking at a situation where maybe some of these become 6-year deals now instead of 8s. And I'm curious to see if that becomes their way of doing it. The second contracts for Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Patrick Kane, and Jonathan Toews were all 5 years.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think Toronto's going to do 5 years for Nylander because that comes right to unrestricted free agency. But I wonder if in some of these situations, the number 5 or 6 becomes the solution.
You think it happens that way?
It's I'll be honest. If I was the Leafs, I'd be going to try to get Matthews down at 8 times 12.
Does it not get more dangerous for Toronto if December 1st comes and goes and no Nylander? Because then you have to do it with 3 next year, not just 2.
Yeah, I think that's always a factor. I think they know exactly what they're going to get into. But like I said, if I'm Toronto, I'm doing Matthews 8 times 12, and I'll see what happens.
And that will pause. More of 31 Thoughts, the podcast. We're going to come back with Daniel Briere of the Maine Mariners. That's right. Next on 31 Thoughts.
So, okay, Daniel, how old are you now?
41.
So, will we see a day where you're short a player and you say, I'm unretiring for the night and I'm putting the gear on one more time?
I surely hope not. I love the game. I love hockey. I'll sit and watch hockey games every night of the week. I'm kind of bummed in the summertime when there's no hockey, but I have no interest in playing anymore, and I hope we never get in that position where I have to even think about that.
So I'm curious, do you see yourself as an NHL general manager in your future? Is this what you want to do?
I don't know. I really don't know. And, I've had this great opportunity here to kind of touch on both sides of the organization, learning how everything gets done in the office. Because a lot of my job now is not just the hockey side; it's the business side as well. I'm learning a lot on ticket sales, on sponsorship deals. I'm learning on marketing, social media, and how they approach all of that. I spend a lot of time with people in the office regarding budgets and expenses and revenues. So it's been interesting. It's all a little bit out of my comfort zone, which, I kind of like because it's something new every day. But I also love the hockey side of it. And this job, I get to touch on both of them. I really don't know where it's going to take me. I haven't had the chance really to think much about that lately because it's been so much fun, and every day it's going 100 miles an hour. We'll see. I don't know what the opportunities will be in the future, but I'm really enjoying myself right now.
How difficult is it as an ex-player to cut a hockey player? Have you gone through that experience? And what's it like being an ex-player and saying to someone, you know what, you can't play on this team, guy?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned we've had to deal with that the last 3 days. We've been making cuts, and guys sometimes that you really like, you like watching, but it just doesn't fit in the lineup. You have too many guys. It's not fun, and I try to put myself in their shoes. What are the things you don't want to hear, right? You don't want to hear, it's just a numbers game. We don't have room for you. You try to give them a more detailed explanation and what are the things that they need to work on to get back to that level. But it's certainly not the best part of the job.
Well, you went through that. I mean, it's been talked about in your own career, how you went through that. So I can understand that you must be really sensitive to what players think in that moment.
Yeah, I try to be. And at the same time, what's interesting is there's different ways that everybody reacts to it. And, you see the really true characters of players in tough times, not when everything is easy. So it tells you a lot about the guys when they're sitting there and you have to give them the bad news. How are they going to react when they get to their new team? If they're sent down, how are they going to react to that? It tells you a lot about them.
What was it like I remember there was when you were with Phoenix and you were waived. What was that experience like for you? I mean, I think there was some feeling that you might have been picked up by another NHL team, was early in your career. What was that like for you, Danny? Yeah,
it was probably the worst time of my career when you realize that no one wants you, that you're basically everybody's willing to pass on you and they're not interested to bring you on their team. It was definitely the worst part of my career. It was a good experience in the sense that what it taught me how to react about things. But it certainly wasn't easy, and I don't wish it on anyone. The ego takes a shot as well. That's probably the worst part. You see some other guys that you had played with that you think you can do what they do, and all of a sudden they're in the NHL or they're in the American League, and you're being sent down. It's really tough on the ego.
Daniel, one of the things I remember about you as a player is you loved the big games. You were all in Buffalo, in Philly. You were a big game guy. We were fortunate enough to cover a lot of your playoff games with Hockey Night in Canada. And I just remember you always seemed, when the stage was bigger, you got that twinkle in your eye. And I've always wondered about people who succeeded on that stage and people who struggled on that stage. Why do you think you did so well on that, and when the game was bigger? Yeah,
that's all. It's a question I get a lot, and I don't really have a clear answer for it. I wish it would be more simple. I grew up watching hockey every night. I grew up going to bed dreaming that would score a playoff overtime goal. That was one of my biggest fantasy as a kid. So and playing hockey I saw it as a game, but I wanted to live for those moments. I couldn't wait to get to the big games. Even sometimes, in my career, I got in trouble where the lull of the season, the long maybe November, December days of the season would get me in trouble because I couldn't find sometimes the motivation to play, and it probably hurt me, especially early in my career.
I'm sure the guy like Lindy Ruff had a lot of patience for that, like the mid-season. Like he would never be bothered and say, "Oh, I'm not worried about Danny until April."
Yeah, I certainly heard a lot more about Lindy in November and December than I did later in the year. But Lindy was probably the first coach that gave me the chance to play and go out there and make mistakes and use my creativity. He was the first one to give me that freedom to go out there and just play. So I've always had a lot of respect, and I recognize that because of Lindy, it probably started my career.
You were such a fun player to watch. I mean, you were one of, I think, a lot of our favorite players watching. And Elliotte mentioned that Buffalo Sabres team coached by Lindy and Drury and Brian Campbell and Thomas Vanek. It was, I don't think history's done justice to how good that Buffalo Sabres squad was. It was a wildly entertaining team to watch. Yeah. You're a skilled guy, and what I liked about you, maybe more than just your skill, was you could play nasty. Like you weren't shy about, and we really saw that during face-offs. I used to love watching you take face-offs just to see what you were going to do, how you were going to win, and you would win at any cost. Here's the question. What is the dirtiest thing you ever did at a draw, and what's the dirtiest thing anyone ever did to you on a face-off?
Oh, my God. I don't know if I can go there.
Yes, you can.
There is definitely some. I would use the butt end of my stick to let them know. And when I think back about those moments, I usually was very friendly until someone attacked me first. I was, I never saw myself as the aggressor. It was always if someone tried to take advantage of me, especially a big guy that thought that he could bully me around. I had no patience for that. And, I did a few things, not just on face-off, but sometimes if they took advantage of me, I would go back and, play and maybe get outside the line, do something that I wasn't supposed to, just to let them know that I can play that game as well. And I would tell the guys, I said, look, I got you back. Now we can be even and be done with it and play fair, or we keep going at each other and I won't stop. I was fine with the guys. If it was legal and the guy got me, then I was okay with it. But if someone tried to take advantage of me because I was a smaller player, that's the thing that would probably get under my skin more than anything in the world.
Daniel, we want names. Who are we talking about here?
I remember Bob Bugner early in my career. He kind of took some free shots at me, and then I got back at him. I think Brooks Orpik did that once. I got back at him, and after that, we were fine. The rest of my career, every time we played Pittsburgh and Washington after that, Brooks knew he would play me hard. He was very hard and tough to play against, but he would never do anything dirty because we had that respect for each other. There's the obvious names like Sean Avery that I just could not stand.
You know what? Don't feel special.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you're the only one.
There's a list.
You talked about getting under skin. And I remember once asking Glenn Healy, because Glenn worked in between the benches. And when you're that close, you can hear everything going on. And I remember I asked him once, I said, what's the worst you ever heard on the ice between two teams? And he said, hands down, Chicago, Philadelphia, 2010 Stanley Cup Final. He said, I had to make sure that the mute button was on at all times because it was nasty. Danny, how bad was it out there in the Stanley Cup Final 2010?
Well, you have two teams that were extremely competitive. And you know, when on our side we were led by Chris Pronger, and Chris could give it to the referees as well. So it got really, really intense. But that's the way you want it. The thing on my end is I was never really, really good with the rebuttal when someone would come at me. And I remember one time, you'll laugh at this, when I first turned professional, my first training camp actually with Phoenix, we ended up playing a game in Tucson, Arizona. It was one of my first game, and early in the game I got into a little bit of a mini fight, let's say, with Aaron Gavey, and I did okay. I survived, and I thought, oh, you know what? I'm not so bad at this. Like maybe I can fight here and there. And then at the end of the second period, Corey Stillman came over, and I barely spoke English at the time. Corey Stillman came and he gave me a shot. I gave him a shot back, and he turned and he stopped and he looked at me. He's like, "What are you going to do about it?" And I wasn't good with the rebuttal, the comebacks. So all I could think of saying, and in English as well, was, "What are you going to do about it?" And by the time I was done saying that, his gloves were off, and I took about 11 to 15 punches to the forehead. I couldn't even come back in the third period to play not because I was cut, because my head and my forehead were too bumpy and I couldn't put my helmet back on.
Oh my God.
So it was definitely a good lesson to learn. I had to learn the language pretty quick.
Did you fight again after that? I can't remember. Like, how many fights did you have?
Yeah, I had a few. I didn't have that many. I ended up fighting Mike Comrie one time, Kyle Turris. I think I fought Marc-Edouard Vlasic one time as well. But I definitely picked my guys. I was very selective, to be honest with you guys.
So two pieces that I remember on Daniel Briere. One at Hockey Night in Canada, Daniel. I remember one year we did your summer workout where it was the guy's name Hugo? Was that was his name was?
Yep. Hugo Girard.
And they would throw those giant wheels around. So that was your summer workout, and I remember doing that. And Hugo was like a Canadian strongman, right? That was what he did?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Hugo was part of the strongman competition. He was one of the strongest men in the world. Anything that had to do overhead press, there was nobody in the world that could come close to him. So it was intense workout, but really that's when my career kind of turned around. Those extreme workouts with him were tremendous for my career. It got me a lot stronger to be able to compete in the NHL.
And the second one I remember was one done here at Sportsnet after we joined, and that's on your wife, who is a medical pilot. She flies with pilots to keep, I guess she's their doctor. Is that how it goes?
Yeah. She's a doctor in the Air Force, in the U.S. Air Force, and she's in charge of a U.S. squadron of fighter jet pilots. And basically, wherever these guys would get deployed in the world, she would go and follow them where they get deployed, so they could, whatever the U.S. Military does and send them whenever we go overseas. That's what she would do for them. Have
you ever gone on one of those planes? Have the pilots ever taken you up?
I not in the air. So I've sat in the cockpit of a two-seater, an F-15 fighter jet, a two-seater. I sat in one, but I had no interest in going in the air. Misha, my wife, has been up there many, many times. She's able to fly those F-15s. She's not trained to fly them, but if something happens to the main pilot, it's a little bit like everybody has seen the movie Top Gun. That's probably the best way to explain what she does. She's the doctor for them, and once in a while she has to go up in the air to make sure she knows what her guys are feeling when they're up there riding that plane.
How did you two meet? I mean, I met my wife through hockey. I mean, that's not a kind of a no-brainer. How did you meet your wife, Daniel?
Well, she used to go to med school in Philadelphia, so she had a lot of friends in that area, and a friend that we had in common kind of put us together. But I have to admit, whenever we end up at a party somewhere, people will come over and ask me about my career, and they get interested in the fact that I play in the NHL, and then when they find out what she does, I'm completely tossed aside and nobody wants to hear my story. So
That's
I
good.
don't mind, to be honest.
That's good. There's nothing wrong with that.
I remember.
No, not at all.
I remember a few years ago at the Buffalo draft. Austin Matthews goes first overall, and a while before the draft, doing a pre-draft interview with Austin Matthews, and we talked about him growing up in Arizona. And I said, I find you fascinating because in a lot of ways, you started hockey from zero. There was no hockey in your background. You started by going to Coyotes games. What did it for you? And he said, yeah, when I was a kid, like a lot of kids, I loved watching the Zamboni. I thought it was really cool. But the first player I ever attached to was Daniel Briere. That was the guy that I watched.
Did you know that?
You've heard that
Yes.
before, right?
Yeah.
I found out a couple years about it. And I met his dad, who even showed me pictures where we had a carnival in Phoenix, and we have a picture where I'm in the middle with this little guy who was about 5-6 years old. I can't remember exactly how old he was, and his sister. So it's so cool to hear about that. To hear that you were part responsible of someone playing hockey and the reason why he was playing hockey, and the fact that he turned out to be one of the best players in the NHL coming from Arizona. It's amazing, and it's such a compliment.
Have you talked to him since he made it to the NHL?
Yeah, we've talked a couple times here and there, and we've exchanged text messages here and there. To be honest, I was never a big, growing up in Montreal, playing in Buffalo. The Toronto Maple Leafs were always.
I was going to say it must make you just sick.
That I had a hard time watching or cheering for. But since Austin has gotten there, it's one of the most fun teams to watch, and because of him now, I'm watching the Maple Leafs a lot more often whenever I have the chance to catch those games, just to watch him play. He's such a fun player to watch.
Last one for me, Daniel. I remember you had, how many boys did you have?
I have 3 boys.
So now, are any of them players?
They all play hockey. My oldest plays at Alabama University, which it's a club team.
Really?
But yeah, so it's the big university for football.
Yeah.
Probably the number 1 team in U.S. for college football. So he's there playing. And I believe it's Curtis Joseph's son is on the team as well. Taylor, I believe that's his son. So they play together. They're having a blast. He loves it. My middle son is playing junior hockey in the U.S. in the NAHL. I could see him playing Division I hockey possibly in the U.S. eventually. And then we have one boy left at home who's a senior in high school, and he plays midget hockey at this time.
So let me get this straight. You're responsible for Austin Matthews, and your son is playing with Curtis Joseph's kid. So this must just all make you ill as a guy who hated the Maple Leafs.
It's definitely tough to have all those Toronto Maple Leafs roots, but I admit that they've been fun to watch, and it's a great hockey team to watch play. They're so electrifying every single night.
Last one here for me, and we thank you for your time. You've been so generous with it. I know you have a lot of mundane things you can't wait to get back to, Daniel. We'll let you get back to them in a second. Tonight, Elliotte and I are working the national game, and it's the Ottawa Senators facing off against the Philadelphia Flyers. I want to get your thoughts on 2 former housemates of yours that maybe we can use on the broadcast tonight to make us look smart. Tell us about Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier.
Well, they're both fun guys. We both had them in our house living with us. I think Claude, when he moved in with us, he was more of an uncle to the kids. He was a little older. He's probably a little closer in age to me. So the relationship was more of an uncle kind of thing with the kids. When Sean moved in, he was 18 years old, and the kids were 13, 14, and 15. I remember him being at the house playing video games with my kids, and I'd be downstairs having a glass of wine with his parents. So that's it was a different relationship, but it was fun. They were fun to be around. They kept me young. They kept me younger. when I was getting into my 30s to keep up with all the new generation of hockey players.
Well, listen, you've been, as much as you were a delight to watch play, you're a delight to talk to as well. Best of luck with the Maine Mariners, and best of luck with what happens next. It was great to hear that you're back involved in hockey in some capacity, because we are all richer for it.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure talking to hockey with you guys.
Thanks, Danny. Daniel. Okay, Elliotte Friedman, this is going to be a real treat, and ironic that you have a book in front of you called Bad Blood.
It's the wrong book, but that's okay. We don't mind.
And that's the voice of Kim Coates, star of Bad Blood on CityTV. They've got you trotting around today, hustling. I'm hearing you on radio, watching you on television. Now you're slumming it with me and Elliotte here on this little podcast, but we appreciate it.
I don't want to be anywhere else, boys. My nose is not growing. Anytime I can talk a little sports, a little acting, a little Canadiana, I'm at home.
All right. Well, then, before that, let's get some business done. First of all,
Sure.
Season 2 of Bad Blood.
Yeah.
Season 1, not fictional. Trying to stick to official story. Like I'll give you a little backstory. I was adopted. My birth mom covered organized crime in Montreal for a number of years until she had her own family.
Wow.
And at that point, she said, "This is too dangerous for me to cover as a mom, as a wife. So I'm getting out of the game." That's how dangerous it was with organized crime in Montreal. This would have been mid-70s.
Vito Rizzuto passed away in 2013. There was a book written by Peter Edwards and Antonio.
The Castle.
Yeah, called Business or Blood.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Montefiore and Natalie Rodriguez bought the rights to that book. And in that book, boys, I read it in a day and a half, obviously, which is good for me. I got through it real quick because what they decided to do was make a miniseries out of Vito Rizzuto's story. And, the first season was, based on a lot of truths with respect. You know what I mean? Like you have to still be very, very careful because they're still living family members, they're still living cousins and whatnot. What we were able to tell were the truths of the courts, of proven facts, of what happened. And so we used all that to our advantage in the first season. My character, Declan Gardner, is a total fictional character. Totally fictional character. He's Irish. But anyway, Vito brings him in, and that was all true. And he brought him in to his family, and it was 6 episodes of some of the most riveting TV, I think, in Canadian history, certainly for riveting drama. I mean, we as Canadians, right, boys, we talk about hockey. We talk about, we always say, sorry, we're this is the greatest country in the world, bar none. But the one thing sometimes we may be afraid of is some of our darker underside or the darker bellies of society of our beautiful country. And I'm so proud of Mark to cast me, and I got Anthony LaPaglia to do it, and Paul Servino and Enrico Calantoni.
Very cool.
Right? And it was very cool. So that first season was such a big hit. We've just completed season 2. We're showing it starting tonight, 8 o'clock on City, and it's even better.
Well, Kim, you're not afraid to play the dark underbelly because Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, yeah.
And here's the
that
thing.
little biker tail.
Well, here's the thing. Like, when I was told you were coming on, I went this morning. I got on my iPad and I rewatched the premiere of season 5.
Did you?
One of the greatest.
Thanks.
And it's a tough scene to watch. For those of you who are not familiar with the show, at the end of season 4, you accidentally kill the daughter of one of your rivals.
Yeah.
And so he gets his revenge in a brutal way in season 5. And I have seen you interviewed before on this where you said that was the most intense scene you've ever been asked to do.
Ever.
And I just wanted to ask you, how do you do that?
Sure. Kurt Sutter comes up to me in New York. It was 2 months before we started filming. He describes the scene of how we're going to start season 5. I have 2 daughters in real life. I'm a method actor. I'm just lost. I think I teared up in New York at this bar with him. I didn't know so I got the script, a month to go. And there's certain times, Elliotte, when I actually go to a good buddy of mine who's a shrink. I go to him and I talk about the inner workings of the human condition. And this was one of those times. And I'm chained like an animal. I'm in handcuffs. I'm tied to a post. And my beautiful daughter's going to be put in front of me and burned alive. And how do you even? So with his help, we talked about it. It was incredible what I learned about myself and about flight or fight or panic or awe, numbness, shock, fear, and then giving up. All those elements came into that scene. But the props department gets the most props because I had them make me real leather straps for my wrists that looked like my skin, so I could actually wear real handcuffs and really pull. Otherwise, I would have ripped my hands right off. You know, under that. So they made these incredible leather straps. So thank you. And for my cast to see that scene when we had the premiere at the Chinese Man Theater, because none of them were there when I filmed it, right? It was just everyone stood up. Everyone just gave it up. And a standing ovation for me and Rachel Miner and Harold Perrineau played Pope. It was a very emotional time for that.
It was incredible work.
Thanks.
Kim, it really was.
After you've done that, I've always wondered this about method actors specific. After you've done that, what's the rest of your day like? Like, how do you go on to have?
Great question.
I'm going to go have lunch now, guys. Like,
Yeah.
how?
I lost my voice, actually. It was over a 2-night period. So I stayed in a little hotel in downtown Los Angeles. I didn't go home.
Yeah.
And we wrapped about 6 o'clock in the morning on that second night after the second night. And I just went to my little hotel and tried to pass out. And then you get on with your, wow, I'm kind of glad that's over. Do you know what I mean? Then we'll get on with the story. So, yeah.
Now you've, you've had a fascinating career. I mean, you played Macbeth. I think the youngest at Stratford. I mean, you want to know what Canadian things to do? Shakespeare production in Stratford. Yeah. Right? I mean, that is, when you look at, the totem pole of great Canadian things to do. Hey, I was at Stratford as Macbeth. I was an English major at university. I loved all of Shakespeare's early slasher play, Titus Andronicus, right?
Look at you pulling out the Titus card.
Listen, the stage.
He was on Wikipedia like 2 minutes ago.
Listen, Titus was that was it. It was like blood on the stage and heads rolling.
I
am King Curtain. It's
never done. That's awesome.
Best. You think that he's summing up? No, he's just adding up. And there's another body and another body.
Yeah, Shakespeare was on a lot of mushrooms when he did those two plays for sure.
So what was that? I mean, you're a young actor doing this, and you talk about getting into character now. I mean, how do you become the process of becoming Macbeth was what?
It was a compilation of me at University of Saskatchewan doing 25 plays over a 3-year period, if you can imagine that and discovering acting, wanting to become a professional actor, moving to Toronto, waitering at the Nag's Head Tavern.
Are you at Nag's?
Really? Goddamn straight I was. Yeah.
You probably served me when I was underage.
I bet I was right across from the strip joint. I can't remember it right now, really. On Eaton Center there and Yonge Street Diner. Anyway, I had to waiter before things started working out for me. Went to Halifax, Neptune Theater, Broadway. Right after Stratford, I went to Broadway, Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway, and then Hollywood discovered me, and I'm sitting with you guys, really.
Now, you're Red Wings, right?
Yeah.
So Gordie Howe, obviously?
Yeah, it was Gordie Howe. I mean, I'm a Leaf fan, too. I'm a Buffalo Sabres fan. I love the Ducks. I love the Hawks. I mean, I'm so lucky. Like, I don't know how you guys do it when you travel and get to meet all these guys, like how you keep your affiliations. You know what? Like, I love the boys. Like, I love the players. So, yes, I'm a Red Wings fan because of Gordie Howe, for sure. Saskatoon, Floral, Saskatchewan, 8 minutes from my dad's house in Saskatoon. But I come on, Leafs, 67. I remember my dad crying. Yeah, it was an incredible time.
So your dad was a Leafs fan?
Yeah. So is my little brother. My little brother's a Hawks fan. So we get some buns thrown at each other. Christmas time was pretty brutal back in the day.
I dropped the logo love years ago, but players, like I cheer for, there are certain players that I cheer for. Generally, as I told Elliotte before, I cheer for chaos. Whatever's the best story, whatever produces the most interesting story, that's what I want. That's what I cheer for chaos. And I cheer for individuals. And I don't care who wins a game, but I do cheer for chaos. Like, that's what you kind of live for in sports. Like, Elliotte and I have talked about this before. Sports kind of exists in this realm. My head knows one thing, but my heart feels another. Yeah. And then there's sports in between. And I can't, we were talking about this last week, I can't as a grown man explain to you or philosophically justify why I get a charge out of a hockey fight, but I do.
Oh, but so do I. But so do I.
There.
So does any real Canadian. I think with the changing of the guard of like the head injuries. Football's trying their best. Hockey needs to do a better job with those head injuries that Lindros had back in the day. We're starting to figure that out. But what I do miss is the Gordie Howe triple,
Gordie Howe
hat trick. Yeah, I don't see as many fights as I used to, and they were. I mean, Bobby Probert, who I got to meet once, one of the most gentle,
absolutely,
very unfortunate, depression stuff with Bobby and his issues, but he was a gentle giant. But man, could he fight? I mean, right? Could he fight?
He's maybe the best ever.
Maybe the best ever.
The thing about Bob was, even if he didn't win the fight, he got a piece of you.
Yeah.
And the one thing I always loved about Probert is a lot of the veteran guys won't give a kid a shot, right? Will not like, hey, you know what? There's no reason for me to fight you because if I beat you, well, I'm supposed to. But if I lose, oh man, and we saw this with the Taidomi fight with the Rangers and Red Wings, all of a sudden, you've knocked me off and that just damages me and all of a sudden you're a star. But Probert, I remember Mel Engelstad telling me the story when he was at Washington and Probert was with Chicago.
Wow.
And he was a kid. And he's like, I'm 18 years old, but I'm lining up in an exhibition game next to Bob Probert. He has no reason to fight me. None. No reason at all. And I said, Bob, will you do me the honors? He goes, you know what? When I was coming up, guys did it for me. So I'll do it for you.
No, he did not say that.
To Mel Engelstad. And Mel Engelstad had the best line. He goes, I said, what was it like, Mel? And he goes, well, we dropped our gloves at the drop of the puck. And all I remember was Bob grabbing me and hitting me 3 times in the face. And all I could think of was, holy F, Bob Probert is punching me in the face. This is the coolest thing in the world.
Ever. Oh, come on.
But he was always the guy that would do the honors for the kids because there were some veteran guys that did it for
Amazing.
him. So growing up in Saskatchewan, when did you first put on skates?
As soon as we could. I mean, my mom still has my the little hockey stick that us Saskatchewan boys would get when you pop out of your ma. You get a little hockey stick if you're a boy. Mm-hmm. Now it's boys and girls, which is awesome.
Yep.
But yeah, no, right away. I knew when I didn't make the contacts in Saskatoon, which is our only midget team, when I didn't make the contacts, I wasn't going to be good enough for the NHL.
Sure.
But I was a solid player.
Do you still play now at all?
Well, I did both the Goon movies, right? So I played the head coach in both of those, and I had so much fun doing that. So I always strapped my skates on at lunchtime and played with the fellas and had my gloves, and I played with Chris Draper. When they closed the Joe, I went there. They put me up, and a buddy of mine is a Leaf fan. The Leafs were playing the Wings that night, and it was so ironic because Babcock had just taken over the Leafs, and Babcock's my guy, Saskatoon, my Wings. Now he's with the Leafs, which is amazing. So for me to walk around that building and see it for the first time, and they've been begging me to go there ever since Sons of Anarchy started. Yeah. And with my schedule and stuff, I could just never make it, not even to a playoff game. Yeah. So they finally called and said, we're closing the Joe this year. And I went, oh my God, that's right. So I got there and I spent 2 days in Detroit, and Draper and I got to skate pre-skate, and Zetterberg gave me his gloves and his stick. You know what I mean? I went to they lost 4-0. We couldn't even score a goal. I blamed myself.
That's because Zetterberg gave you his gloves.
Yeah, that's what my buddy said. That's what my buddy said.
All his goals were in your bag.
We're heavy on time and we got a really busy schedule. Really quick, season 2, Bad Blood.
Bad Blood tonight, 8:00, City, season 2. It's epic, boys. If you like chaos, I mean it, brother. It's it's full of chaotic moments. It's better than the first season. It's Declan's a lone wolf now, and there's an Italian, there's a thunderstorm that's come from Italy to take me down, and we leave no prisoners. There's just no prisoners left, and it's so beautifully shot and acted. I can't wait to share it.
Kim, it's an honor. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, man.
Really
Next time.
treat.
See you guys soon.
Kim,
honestly,
thank you
pleasure.
so much.
Pleasure.
Much appreciated. Finish up with some Ask 31s. This from NHL Flames fan Jeff. This is good. This has to be asked. What do you guys think of abbreviation gate? You know what that is?
Yeah, I'm well aware of what that is.
Also known as when Elliotte uses the wrong team abbreviations and the Twitter world goes nuts. An example, when you want to write Calgary, instead of CGY, you write CAL.
I've admitted this. It's a pure troll. I love when people get upset. I laugh, I just think, life is supposed to be fun, and as fun as you can make it. And
it's to torture people? That's fun for you?
I just love watching the reactions. I do. It's a total troll job. And I'm trying to think of some, like the teams I do.
WPG is now WIN, and it's going to stay that way?
Winnipeg is one. Montreal, MON, it stays that way.
Good Lord.
Columbus, CLB.
Oh, man.
Calgary, CAL. Vancouver is now VCR. And I'm thinking of some new ones. Like, I have a feeling that Buffalo's going to become BLO.
You'll make a lot of fans there. This from Brooksy. Why is it that inside info or rumblings or whatever are out there more with certain management versus others? Example, in Philly, when Clark and Holmgren were in charge, everything leaked. And with Hextall, like Elliotte said the other week, it's easier to get nuclear codes.
I think what happens, it's a great question, and part of it is that, Jeff, we work in Canada, so our primary focus is Canada. And I think it's harder for the Canadian teams to keep secrets because, we're so competitive to get information, and those are the teams we primarily cover, that it's harder for them to keep secrets because we're constantly digging and looking for things. So, I think Philly, the Flyers are trying to work their way back to the top of the league. But I think when you're a Canadian team or you're a top team, it's harder to keep secrets.
Brooksy, great question. This one from at Hunter's Helmet. Great question, too. Watch this. Is Gary Bettman grooming anyone internally to replace him? If not, where do you think the next NHL commissioner will come from? I've always assumed Bill Daley.
I've always assumed that, too. I've always assumed that he would be the guy. One of the things, Bettman, it's 25 years? I wonder.
93, he took over.
Yeah, I really wonder. We have to get him on because I want to ask him how much longer he wants to do this.
I'm sure he would love to. We can assure him no duck calls. That could be the hook. Come on, Gary, no duck calls.
Maybe we'll get him to wear the Matthews coat.
That's a good-looking coat. I want to see you wear that in Winnipeg. From our man Mike Agello, with news of Shane Wright applying for exceptional status. Well, speculation is he will apply for exceptional status. Who is the most impressive young player you've seen in junior, whether he made the NHL or not? Brian Fogarty for me.
Yeah, I'm not a guy who watches a ton of junior hockey, but when I was younger, I used to go to a lot of Marlies games. And you'll remember this player.
Bruce Dowie, netminder?
No.
Oh,
he played for the Leafs briefly, but I believe he played his junior hockey in Windsor. I know Jeff, you'll tell me if I'm wrong. But do you remember Ernie Godden?
Scored a bajillion goals. Spitfires.
So he came to Toronto for a game, and I must have been like 10 or 11 years old, maybe even younger. And he lit up the Marlies. Like, he was a little guy, but nobody could get the puck away from him. He did whatever he wanted. And
Spitz have had a few guys like that. Billy Bowler was like that years later.
And he played with the Leafs briefly. And I loved watching him. Ernie Godden was a guy I remember as a kid. I thought, this guy's going to be the Gretzky of the NHL. And I just didn't know enough to know that wasn't going to be the case.
He's a heck of a junior hockey player.
Yes, he was.
Michael Ong submits this. Elliotte, how much commentary do Kelly and Nick offer up while watching HNIC games? I'm just picturing Kelly doing color for you guys since that's his usual job. Watching with two ex-players, Nick and Kelly, on Saturday nights.
It's not quite like that. I'm going to get in a little bit of trouble here, but why not? So we have a room that we all watch upstairs. Jeff referred to it earlier. It's been remade. It was used for ice surfing. And, there's a lot of talk about what goes on. Kelly puts on a sweater. He looks like Mr. Rogers. But he's Kelly's quiet most of the time. He'll talk about, what he wants to talk about. But other than that, he's generally pretty quiet. Nick is boisterous a lot of times in very funny ways. Like, he says things that, they just make us all laugh.
It's hilarious.
There's no question, though, that, and I have talked about this a lot, how much more I've learned about hockey working at Hockey Night for two reasons. One, people look at you differently when you work for Hockey Night. They'll talk to you more. They'll give you a little bit of more information. The name and the brand carries weight more than the individuals in it. But I think the other thing that it's allowed me to do is I remember Glenn Healy the first year, he said to me, you don't know how to watch practice. You watch practice, it's terrible. And guys like Glenn and Kelly and Craig Simpson and Greg Millen was really good at this too. They would show me, like, this is how you watch a practice. This is what you should be looking for. And as a guy who didn't play hockey at a high level, I stopped after Pee Wee. I didn't really know the details of the game that well. And those are the guys who taught me the details of what to look for and what to see. And that really has helped me a lot.
Total luxury of being able to watch hockey games with ex-players. I remember sitting down watching games with PJ, which was fascinating. Colby Armstrong is
Yes,
any
all
chance
these
you
guys.
get, Mark Savard now, like any chance you get to Jason York to watch hockey games with ex-players is fully worth your time.
The other thing, too, is PJ scored, 5 NHL goals?
Was it that many?
I think so. And you forget, like, Nick scored 60 goals one year in junior.
North Bay. He is, by the way, 17th all-time in OHL scoring goals.
Nick was a 60-goal scorer in junior, and PJ was a really good Quebec League player and also a really good Canadian University player. Like, it's the other thing you realize is that if you play just one game in the National Hockey League,
You're great.
You're a hell of a player. And here are two guys who are really talented players who had to fight in a lot of ways to stay in the NHL, But the one thing about them is it doesn't mean they weren't skilled, and it doesn't mean they don't understand the games. Like I remember PJ at CBC, he did something about Ovechkin scoring when he was going through a slump. And people are tweeting at it going, why is a guy who scored 5 career goals talking like this about Ovechkin? And it goes to what you said earlier in the podcast. Don't throw it away because he wasn't an Ovechkin-like goal scorer.
Yeah.
Listen to it because he's smart. And these guys are really smart about the way the game works.
Let's finish up with this one. Where'd it go? Here we go. From Lars Thorsel. Why do NHL GMs distrust European coaches to the point that they'd rather hire head coaches from colleges rather than experienced Swedes, Finns, and others who are available? It brings up the case of Rikard Grönborg specifically. That's going to be more of a thing.
It will be. I think it will be. I mean, for one thing, the games are so different. I think that's one issue. I remember John Davidson once asking him about it. When Alpo Suonen was coaching Chicago, he said he went up to Suonen and said, how long is it going to take the Blackhawks to learn your system? Like 2-3 weeks? He said like 3 months. And Davidson was like, 3 months? Like,
Better have that.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if that's the issue, the amount of patience we have now for losing and stuff like that, it's gone. There's too much money at stake. There's too much on the line. And, the one thing about Grönborg is he's got a lot of U.S. history.
Yep.
He played here, in college. I think that'll help. I just think that the biggest level of distrust is, can you have a system that can get us to start out well? Because I remember Davidson telling me about Suonen, and there's no way that a team is going to be able to do that right now.
Ulf Samuelsson going to be a head coach one day?
I think he's got a shot.
Yeah.
Absolutely he's got a shot. But, it's funny. Like, I don't think about Ulf Samuelsson as European because he
stayed.
He's here. He's been here.
Specifically, the Swedes go and they stay home.
A billion years.
Seldom come back.
Like, to me, Grönborg, a guy who's been overseas a long time, that's what you're talking about when you're talking about more of a European.
We'll finish up on that thought. All right, thanks again for joining us here. Whether you're watching us on YouTube, listening on iTunes, sportsnet.ca, wherever. Thanks so much for stopping by the 31 Thoughts podcast. We are back in 7 days. Have a good 7, folks. We'll talk to you soon.
I'm not a quiet singer, but I'm a quiet talker. They tell me to be louder. No, I won't even bother. No, I won't even bother. That's not my style. I don't need a scream to get my point across. I don't need a yell to know that I'm the boss. That is my choice, and this is my voice. You can tell that to the boys. You can tell that to the boys. You can tell that to the boys.